The Teutonic Knights are a great example of how arms and armour evolved. They span from the time of the Crusades through to the height of armour at the beginning of the 15th century.
So you're probably wondering, what are we doing outside of the workshop and what am I doing dressed as a knight? This is a talk that we got to give at the Abbey Medieval Festival here in Brisbane, Australia, with the Teutonic Knight reenactment group looking at the history of arms and armour and how that evolved with time. I've been an armourer for about 3 years professionally now, and it's not very often that we get to escape the dungeon of the workshop and get out in the wild with the general public and see that armour in real life. In this video, you'll get to see us put a dent in one of our helmets, dip a lady knight, and answer a few commonly misconceived questions on armour, such as a few pet peeves I have about armour in the film industry. Stay tuned to the end of the video for all of that goodness, and let's crack on and talk history.
First things first, armour, how did it evolve? You can actually see right here a few different examples, configurations of armour. I'm depicting a knight from around the year 1250, so the middle of the 13th century. At that time, the Teutonic Knights were in Eastern Europe, going to war against the Lithuanians and the Poles, clearing a territory for themselves. This is about the middle of the order and when they're most active. I have shouse, male shouse, on my legs that cover my entire leg. I have under that a hauberk that comes down to my knees, sleeves that extend down to my wrists, and historically they would have had mitts similar to this that were actually attached to the male shirt itself. And on top of my head I wear a padded coif covered by this male coif underneath that.
This is actually a really cool moment where we get to see lots of different pieces of armour coming together in the one place. See, as armourers, we're often working very hard on the details on one specific piece, but it takes a reenactor to take that piece and combine it with all the other bits and pieces, the mail and the clothing and the weapons, and consider a living, breathing character in time to take it, let it shine, and bring it to life as a living recreation of history.
And that is capped with this helmet here. This helmet is actually known as the Adrians Helm. It's a replica of a helmet in Berlin, in the Museum of Berlin. It's the earliest surviving great helm we have, and may have been worn by a German knight or a Teutonic knight in time, which is pretty cool. Even some of the little details like the way that this is shaped here at the front come directly from the original piece, which I find very exciting. I have a few of the guys here wearing some armour. Adrian, step forward. Adrian's wearing another helmet I've happened to make, another Adrian Helm. And in case you guys are wondering how real the armour is, does it actually do the job? Is it safe? I've got Adrian to put on his helmet and I'm going to give him a bit of a crack just so you can see the armour in action. Yeah.
It's good to know you, Adrian.
Ready? Are you prepared?
Hey, got me done.
Have you got your will in order?
Yes.
All right, we shall proceed.
Everything
All right.
goes to the Teutons.
How are you, Adrian?
Good.
Good. Harder? A little harder? Harder, Adrian?
I'll clench my teeth. Put my yep.
All right,
Good.
harder. All right. How are you?
That shook me a little.
That shook him a little bit. So, the idea of armour is to protect the wearer. Inside of Adrian's helm here, Adrian, would you remove your helm? There is a liner inside the helmet. It's actually a suspension liner. And the idea of the suspension liner is it actually reduces the force of impact. So a lot of the force goes into that flex of the liner. It's padded linen with wool. Sometimes I use horsehair to stuff these liners. But this, on top of more padding and mail, provides an excellent protection for the head. As you can see, Adrian is fine and the helmet's done its job. In fact, it hasn't deformed at all, apart from a few nicks here at the front. Thank you, Adrian. So moving forward in history, let's move forward about 100 years. We have the 14th century armour. In the 14th century, we see a lot of experimentation in plate armour. At the very beginning of the 13th century, they're still wearing complete mail. They begin to add coats of plates. Later, about the mid-14th century, we start to see single-piece globose breastplates like what Sarah's wearing here. We see legs, cuisse, and greaves being added. Eventually, arms, And then by the end of the 14th century, the early 15th century, where the Teutonic Knights end at the Battle of Tannenberg, we actually see head-to-toe full plate armor on the battlefield.
It's interesting to note that the full plate suit of armor that we're so often familiar with in the common conception of a knight is not something that occurs to far later in the medieval period, closer to the Renaissance. In fact, most of the medieval period is a tapestry of different styles and experimentation with armor, and a process of constant change. And that's what's fascinating for me as a modern armourer, is that I get to look at the whole tapestry from beginning to end and choose between all of these different styles, not getting stuck like armourers in history were in one specific style in time. That's what makes understanding the evolution of armour so important to placing ourselves correctly in that historical narrative.
Some examples of helmets that they wore in the 14th century are these clap visor helmets, very classic German helmets, which is why in our group we depict German Teutonic Knights. These are the helmets that we use. Sarah's just going to put on her helmet. And a few quick features with Sarah's helmet as well. You can see it completely encapsulates her face. It has what's called an aventail attached to it. Sarah, spin 360 degrees for me. This aventail here is stitched on and attached to the helmet, protecting her. It has a padded liner under it to take the impact of weapons, and this protects Sarah's shoulders, her throat. It's very difficult for me to get into Sarah's throat when she's wearing that. Turn to face me. What's great about bassinets, they all have this classic point towards the top and this Gothic arch shape. Unlike the flat top Dargan helms you saw, this deflective surface makes it very hard for me to actually put any kind of concussive force into her head, plus the suspension liner. So we're seeing an evolution in the understanding of how armor works. Later on in the 15th century, we move to helmets such as this one, a sallet. The sallet is probably the most common helmet from the 15th century, and takes over from the bassinet and the great helms going into the 15th century. Weapons, all right, so weapons also evolved with the armor. In the earlier time periods, the sword, the axe, the spear are the weapons of choice. Swords like this one from the earliest time period in the Crusade times. We also have axes like this one. Brad, step forward please. Designed to hew through the opponent. The axe is a deadly weapon. Even mail can be busted and broken with this weapon here. And an interesting thing to note about weapons and combat in history is that most fighters used pole arms first and foremost before their swords. Swords are sort of like a side carry. If you think about modern combat, a weapon, a spear or an axe was your rifle, your sword was your side carry, and worst comes to worst, you have that dagger that you can stab a man when he's down. Actually, that's a great question. How do you take down a fully armored knight? What gets through all that mail and armor or plate armor that goes on there? Well, if you can't give him a strong enough blow to concuss him, the main goal is to get him on the ground. Sarah, I'm going to demonstrate with you once again. See as you're in armor.
And that's your pleasure.
In battle, Sarah might be wearing a lot more kit. She'd be wearing a helmet and all of those components as well.
Do you want me to put it back on?
Can you put your helmet back on for me? In combat, most weapons that we have here can't actually get through the armor. You know, you might have heard of swords cutting through armor. Never happens. Swords cannot cut through armor. Axes can barely cut through armor. If anything, they don't cut through it, they just cave it in places where it's weakest. A tool like this can potentially be used to puncture armor with what's called a crow's beak. This point here. A well-placed strike to the helmet may puncture the helmet, and even then it probably gets stuck in that armor, difficult to pull out, may not penetrate the full way. So if I really want to take Sarah down, I need to actually get in close with her, maybe concuss her, get behind her, and throw her to the ground. That's a dip, Sarah. Throw her to the ground, down to the ground. Grab something like a dagger here. And while she's pinned down, maybe I have another knight helping me hold her to the ground. She's squirming, she's trying to get away. There's a couple of places I can actually kill her, and they're not fun places. First and foremost is in the throat, up and under here. I can stab her through there. I can subdue her and go through the ocularium straight through the eyeball, through the brain into the back of the skull. And last but not least, there's an artery in here, which, because of movement, this place in a knight is never covered. That's how you go to the toilet, by the way, in case you're wondering. This is never covered. You can always get here. So if I can restrain her, I can get the carotid artery right in the thigh and she'll bleed to death. Or if I don't want to kill her, I'll ransom her, because knights are worth a lot of money. And if I was a man-at-arms or someone of lower status, capturing a knight, ransoming them later would make me quite wealthy. So that's probably what I'd do. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, give her a round of applause. So that's a general scope of arms and armour. We go from mail, bringing in great helms replaced by bassinets, bassinets replaced by full armour, like you can see on the jousters if you guys got out to go see them. Arms and armour evolve from basic weapons, daggers, swords and spears, all the way through to pole axes and war hammers designed to puncture that plate and maim the knight. And that's pretty much the history of arms and armour in a nutshell. I'm open to any questions you might have. As an armourer, as a professional, I try and answer all your questions as best as I can. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.